Robert Spencer with JihadWatch, which is a program of the David Horowitz Freedom Center. JihadWatch is dedicated to exposing the activities, both stealthy and violent, of jihadists. And one of the most notable of these activities is the Sharia initiative, of which Sharia finance is just one part. There is an attempt, piece by piece, step by step, to insinuate Sharia law, Islamic law, into the United States. Islamic law, as it is formulated by the people who are behind this initiative, is inherently supremacist and violent and denies equality of rights to women and to non-Muslims. It denies the freedom of speech, denies the freedom of conscience, and is at variance with constitutional law in numerous other ways. And the Muslim Brotherhood, among other groups, is dedicated to bringing it to the United States and is working to do so under the guise of a number of atomized and separate, distinct initiatives that usually advance under the aegis of civil rights. But it's really a mockery of civil rights, because it is advancing the idea that people should be separate and unequal rather than integrated and equal. For example, the initiatives to establish on college campuses by the Muslim Students Association, which is a Muslim Brotherhood group, which is operating a thing called the Muslim Accommodations Task Force. This initiative is directing Muslim college students to push university administrators, in the name of civil rights, for separate gym facilities, separate cafeteria facilities, separate living quarters, and in all cases it is operating under the same principle that animated the Jim Crow South in the early part of the 20th century. The Supreme Court in Brown versus the Board of Education of Topeka in 1954 stipulated that separate educational facilities were inherently unequal, and that therefore the doctrine of separate but equal had no place. They understood, in other words, that the idea of separate facilities for blacks and whites perpetuated the proposition of white supremacism, of the idea that whites were socially or in some other way superior to blacks. The Sharia separatist initiative, being carried out by the Muslim Accommodations Task Force of the MSA, and the larger initiative of the Brotherhood, is to do exactly the same thing, to establish Muslims as a protected class who have special rights that non-Muslims do not have, and who do not have to live in close contact with or proximity to non-Muslims, because they are inherently unclean, as is stipulated by the Quran, chapter 9, verse 28. The Quran the Quran, in saying that unbelievers are unclean, is providing the foundation for a supremacist notion that Muslims are the best of people on earth, as the Quran also says in chapter 3, verse 110. And if the best of people are in contact with the most vile of created beings, as the Quran says the unbelievers are in chapter 98, verse 6, then obviously this is something that would contaminate them, that would bring them in contact with that uncleanness. And so it is a separate and unequal proposition, just as much as the Jim Crow South was. And as such, anybody who believes in freedom, in equality of rights of all people before the law, and in the freedom of free speech and the freedom of conscience, ought to resist the stealth jihad to advance Sharia in the United States.